Hey kids, it's John, Japanese cowboy himself. I hate Mondays, but there are some benefits to Mondays. I'm going to tell you a funny little story that involves drugs, Japan, failed products, broken dreams, and being remembered for hooking someone up despite not even being sure that that they were there with me while we were having conversations. So, a while ago, there was this guy who would come in here, and we get a lot of weird drug addicts in here. There's a strange crossover. A lot of people rub elbows in the bike business, especially in a shop like this. You've got, rich racers, and you've got street-level junkies who are trying to run a hustle. And also just some poor homeless people who don't have a car. Like, their only way of getting around is on a busted-ass bicycle. So, there is one fella who shall remain nameless, and he was one of the better junkies. His deal appeared to be that he was both a junkie as well as someone who was into bikes. So you see, there's a group of people who are into bikes because they're junkies. Either their life has fallen apart to such a degree that all they can do is steal bikes, sell stolen bikes, and ride stolen bikes around to get more drugs or whatever they're doing. And there's a very small subset of those junkies who were into bikes before they got hooked on drugs. And make no mistake, drugs are awesome. I'm not dissing drugs. It's just like, get your shit together, When your hands look like, I don't know how to describe it, like a bundle of rotten grapes. They're all purple and covered in sores and gnarled like this. It's time to get off the stuff, my man. So, this friendly junkie he's got the stamina. He's all over the place. He's picking stuff up at garage sales. He's going left. He's going right. I had mentioned to him, we were talking about the weirdest bike stuff we'd ever seen. And he's been around. He's seen some crazy stuff. And I was saying that I'd wished that I could get my hands on an Aeroswing Sus 21. This is a rarer than hen's teeth suspension road fork that was designed by a fella in Japan. Now, there used to be a pretty detailed article on this man, not the junkie, the Japanese man, on the internet, and I even checked the Wayback Machine. I can't find it. From what I remember, the Aeroswing project was a foray into bicycles by a man who ordinarily designed landing gear for light aircraft. So this is pretty unique. You don't really see many forks that are like this. So, off the top of my head, there are only two other workable suspension road forks I've ever seen. One was the fork off the Cannondale Silk Road, which was I believe most of them were elastomeric, meaning there's a little bit of rubber that is squishy that imparts the suspension properties. That was on a hybrid and a road bike called the Silk Road. Man, those are cool. Really, really cool. Because you have, either an aluminum or carbon fiber legitimate road fork that has basically a head shock. So if you're familiar with Cannondale's head shock system, all of the guts of the suspension system live inside of the head tube, or just underneath of it. So Silk Road was that. The other one was the tested at Roubaix RockShox Ruby, which was basically like an anorexic Mag 21. This was in the 90s, that had no cantilever studs, and in the middle of the brake bridge was a hole to mount your road calipers. So and honestly, like, my favorite type of bikes, I think, from professional cycling are the Roubaix bikes. You want to see some freaky shit? Google 90s Roubaix race bikes. You'll see full suspension Bianchi road bikes. You'll see the RockShox Ruby. You'll see all these designs. They were really a proving ground for bizarre designs. So we were talking about this, and I was talking about how much I wanted to get my hands on a Sus 21, and Homeboy produced a Sus 21 a few weeks later. He, in his cracked up state, just looked around, and eventually found a Sus-21, and because I had been kind to him repeatedly, despite, him really looking pretty bad and smelling pretty strange, he's a human being, and so I took care of him when I needed to take care of him. And dude just walked in and said, "Hey, I found one of those Sus-21 arrow swing forks. Here you go, buddy," and just gave it to me. Having said that, it's just it's like a cool conversation piece. You see how it works here? So, first and foremost, this is too long. I had to make a custom recess nut. I had to actually make a recess nut out of a piece of fucking IKEA furniture hardware. Thank you, IKEA, for making your stuff metric. Anyway, there's like a weird lag bolt thing and a cross pin in one of their tables, and it's just about the correct diameter to be a recess nut. And the internal thread is a 6x1 millimeter, so it worked out nicely. So these must have come with a special recess nut. I mean, you can imagine with what I have the absolute longest recess nuts ever made, and none of them even came close to being long enough for this. So that was thing one. Thing two, I installed this on my Team Seiko red and yellow McDonald's Cannondale and took it for a few test rides. Now, that may have been ill-advised. I think that I may have been just this close to losing all my teeth. Number one, the elastomers are sort of worn out. So these little rubber guys are what are causing this to have a little bit of bounce to it. You can see it move there. They are the only thing holding the fork dropouts in alignment. So if they're not worn exactly evenly, here's what happens. Your bike pulls really radically to one side. So that was bad. Number two, it creaked and felt like it was going to explode or break on me at any moment. So I put an Uzo Pro on that bike, and I retired this thing. Still, it's the power of being kind to people. You never know what life is going to hand you back if you just treat people like human beings. A word on how this is constructed. There's one bolt per side. Interestingly, the left side has a normal 6x1 with a 5mm head metric bolt holding it on. Yeah. So, split lock washer, two little studs that correspond to those, a small seal to keep the grit out. Look how well it worked. See how clean it is in there? And your elastomer, which, despite the age, is actually pretty soft still. Maybe some would say too soft. Nice little detail here. Hella sus. Your whole crew is sus, fam. Sus-21 Japan. All in all, it's kind of a beautifully made fork. I just would never trust my life to it, ever. But here's the strange thing. The other side is what is it? The other side is a left-hand thread. Now, we are used to left-hand threads on a lot of drivetrain components, like pedals and fixed cups and things like that. I have never seen one. Well, okay, so to be fair, I've never really seen a fork like this, aside from this one, but I don't really... I'm trying to think of a reason why you would need to do it that way, right? Because it's not rotating, it's pivoting back and forth. With an appropriate amount of thread locker and the fact that there are tabs in here keeping it from rotating all the way around, I don't know why you would put a left-hand thread on one side. So on a bottom bracket or pedal, there's this thing called mechanical precession. Precession, look it up. It's very cool. So, basically you have like rotating members, and the action of rotating another member inside of it will cause it to tighten or loosen. So in the case of the pedals, you pedaling forward is actually imparting rotational force, mechanical precession, into the pedal threads. So they're basically self-tightening. Funny story, when I was young and dumb, and actually I'm more full of cum now, but when I was young and dumb and bereft of cum, I thought it would be really cool to make an LSD, so a left side drive track bike. I had it in my head, I took my Dura-Ace cranks and I swapped all the shit over to the left side, and I knew that the lock ring would hold. I basically made an LSD bike. Rode it, and rode it, and rode it for about 3 days, and going up a massive hill, my pedal on my left side, so my drive side crank was now on my left, ripped out, and I bashed my face on the stem and was laying in the middle of nowhere on the side of the road. It was then that I realized maybe engineers do things for a reason. It's entirely probable that the reason we have a normal thread on the right side and a reverse thread or left-hand thread on the left side is there for a reason. And the reason is mechanical precession. So what had happened to me is I had reversed the cranks, and in pedaling reversed cranks, I had caused the threads, rather than tightening as they would on a normal crankset, I had caused them to back themselves off. And I didn't notice until I was in there, 2-3 threads, it just ripped out of my nice Dura-Ace cranks. So you live, you learn. One thing that I found baffling, though, was knowing how precession works, you would think that a bottom bracket would be the opposite that it is. So like on an English bottom bracket, your left cup is a normal right-hand thread, your right cup is a left-hand thread. The one thing I didn't think of was that the bearings themselves reverse the direction of the spin, right? So think of your drive side cup. You're turning your spindle clockwise. You're pedaling forward. Now, the way I was thinking about it when I was young was that, okay, so that means that the drive side cup should tighten righty-tighty, and the other side should tighten lefty-tighty. However, the bearings themselves, you are turning the spindle this way. They are interfacing with bearings that are in the cup against the cup and spindle, and the bearings, just like any gear, you turn a gear this way, this gear is turning the opposite direction. So the bearings inside the cup, they're actually spinning backwards, which is why we have a left-hand threaded cup on the right side, and why we have a right-hand threaded cup on the left side, and why Italian fucking bicycles fall apart when you use them. JK, you just need Loctite. Or the arms of a champion. So, yeah, that's sort of a digression regarding mechanical precession. But, this isn't imparting rotation. This is just pivoting. Doot, 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 doot. So, I don't know. Maybe over-engineered. Then again, this guy's other projects had people flying in fucking airplanes and landing on them at 80 miles an hour. So, he probably knew what he was doing. Now, I'll come out for the long shot. Dana, 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 dana. Looks like it has an erection. Ladies,